There is a version of you that you've been carrying around for a long time. Maybe it is the version that holds things together, the one who reads the room before anyone else does, the one who knows almost instinctively when to make themselves smaller, when to step in, when to stop asking. You probably don't think of it as a version. You just think of it as you. And that is the thing I want to sit with tonight. Not the question of where that version came from, but the quieter question underneath it: is it the only one? Before you had a word for it, your family already had a role for you. Not written down anywhere, not announced, but present in the way certain things were rewarded and certain things were quietly corrected. The child who learned that being capable kept the peace. The child who learned that needing things made people tired. The child who learned that if they could just hold this one thing together, everything would stay okay. These weren't lessons anyone sat you down to teach. They were conclusions you drew yourself, because you were paying attention, because you were perceptive, because that is what children do when the stakes are high enough. Think about Ren. Ren is 31. By every external measure, they're the person everyone wants around. The one who anticipates what the project needs before the meeting starts. The one who texts first to check in. The one who, at every family gathering, is somehow already cleaning up before anyone else has noticed. Dinner is over. Ren has been called dependable so many times it doesn't even register anymore. They've started to hear it as a simple description of who they are. What Ren hasn't quite named yet is that this started a long time before the job, before the friendships, before the apartment they keep so organized it startles. New guests. It started in a house where someone needed to. Donald Winnicott spent decades working with children and adults and arrived at a distinction that I keep coming back to. He called it the true self and the false self, and I want to be careful here because false self sounds like it is saying something is fake. Like there is a real you hiding underneath a performance. That is not quite what he meant. The false self isn't a lie. It is an adaptation. It is the version of you that organized itself around what the environment could hold. Around what was safe to show. Around what got you warmth and stability and the particular relief of not creating a problem. The false self isn't something you invented. It is something that grew very sensibly in response to a world that had specific requirements. And here is the part that Winnicott kept returning to. The true self isn't the part of you that got buried. It is the part that never quite had a chance to be accommodated. It is not that you suppressed something real. It is that some version of you never found a relationship spacious enough to exist inside. That is a different kind of loss. Not something stolen. Something that just never got the room it needed. Ren can tell you, if you ask exactly what everyone around them needs. What makes their mother anxious, what their closest friend reaches for when she is spiraling, what their manager needs to hear before a difficult conversation. What Ren is less certain about is what Ren actually wants. Not what they think they should want, not what would be reasonable, not what would be easy on everyone else. Just what they want. That is not a personality trait. That is a history. John Bowlby's theory of attachment gave us a concept that sounds simple, but lands differently the longer you sit with it. He called them internal working models. The idea is this: the relationships you had earliest, the ones where you learned what connection feels like, what safety requires, what you need to do to be kept. Those relationships don't stay in the past. They become a template, not a conscious one, not a rule book you open and consult, but a background assumption, a set of expectations, so familiar they feel like just the way things are. And when you step into a new relationship, a friendship, a partnership, a team, you bring that template with you. You're not trying to repeat the pattern, you just keep finding yourself, almost accidentally, in the same position. Ren's partner once said to them, "You know what, I notice, whenever I try to do something for you, you immediately try to find a way to give it back. Like you can't just receive something." Ren laughed and said, "Yeah, that is just how I am." But that night they thought about it for a long time, because they'd heard something like it before. From a friend, from a therapist they'd seen briefly at 25. From themselves in the honest 3 a.m. version of their own thoughts. The position wasn't something Ren chose, but they'd brought it into every room they'd ever been in. The internal working model is still running the audition, still checking whether this new relationship wants the same performance the old one did. And often, not always, but often, the answer it keeps getting back is yes. Because we find our way, without meaning to situations that confirm what we already know how to do. This is the part people usually skip over. The question of why. Why, if the role is exhausting, if you've named it, if you can see the shape of it clearly, why is it still so hard to put down? And the answer that gets offered most often is habit, familiarity, fear of change. Those aren't wrong, but they're not quite the whole thing either. Fromm wrote about the escape from freedom. The way human beings, when given real openness, will sometimes return to a structure not because the structure is kind, but because it is certain. Being defined is less frightening than being undefined. A role, even a demanding one, even one that costs you, gives you an answer to the question, who am I in this room? And that answer, when you've never not had it, is harder to release than it looks. But I think there are 3 more specific reasons that are worth naming slowly. The first, it saved you. Whatever role you settled into in that house, the stabilizer, the invisible one, the capable one, the good one, it actually worked. It reduced conflict. It kept relationships intact. It gave you a way to matter in a system that needed you to matter in a specific way. You didn't pick it up out of weakness. You picked it up because you were paying attention, because you were solving a real problem with the tools you had. That deserves more respect than we usually give it. The second, it gave you something that felt like love. Even if the love was conditional, even if what you were really receiving was approval, relief, the absence of disappointment, that was still the closest thing to being wanted that the environment was offering. And the body doesn't really distinguish between being loved for who you are and being needed for what you do. Both feel like you have a place here, and a place, when you're small and the stakes are existential, is everything. The third, it became your language. It is not that you're performing the role. It is that you think in it. You process new situations through it. You make decisions about work, about when to speak. Using it as your default grammar, you're not acting anymore. You're just speaking. And that is not a flaw. That is how deep adaptation goes. The child who learned not to be a burden grows up into the adult who is genuinely excellent at their job, who never asks for accommodations, who keeps functioning long after functioning costs them, and gets called dependable, and accepts the compliment, and goes home exhausted in a way that doesn't quite have a name. I'm not going to tell you to drop the role, because I don't think it works that way. I don't think you can decide your way out of something that took years to build, that has served real purposes. That is, in some genuine sense, the version of you that made it this far. What I do think is worth asking, not as a demand, not as a project, but just as something to hold. Is there something this version of you has never gotten to try? Not a different personality, not a reinvention. Just a moment where you let something in without immediately finding a way to balance it. A moment where someone asks, how are you? And you answer, without first scanning for what they need to hear. A moment where you are, briefly, not the most useful person in the room. Ren had a moment like that recently. A colleague brought them coffee without being asked. Just set it on the desk and didn't say anything. And Ren's first instinct was to say, oh, you didn't have to. Let me get the next one. And then they stopped and they just said, thank you. And sat with the strange smallness of it. How hard it was, how much it felt quietly, like something. The version of you that survived isn't the only version of you. It is just the one that has had the most practice. Take a moment with this. Think about a role you've carried for as long as you can remember. In your family, in your friendships, in the way you move through a room. What did playing it cost you? What did it protect you from? And when was the last time someone saw you outside of it?